Hello, Vermont. I'm Andy Julow.
And I'm Joanna Grossman.
And this is There's No Way in Creamy.
Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to episode 2. We are back in the skate shack, ready to record. Our first episode is out. Mm-hmm. It's exciting, getting lots of feedback on it.
Yep.
We have a great episode today. We're going to talk about ed funding, everybody's favorite topic, particularly in 2025 legislative session. And then we'll have our last lick section. We have some surprises for each other, so this one could get ugly.
So I'm really excited because we have officially publicly launched the podcast yesterday. So at time of recording, yesterday our first episode dropped, and we are so appreciative of everyone checking it out. We want to take a minute to thank Michael Balzano, my friend Mike, who designed our gorgeous branding logo with the little creamy. He's amazing and wonderful. Thank you, Mike. And I really want to thank everyone who has liked and subscribed and sent it to your friends and sent us feedback. Our DMs are open, so please feel free to reach out and let us know what you think. We really love that. It's been so fun to read all your messages, and we just feel, it's just like wonderful. And we're starting to book out guests, and, we'll be hitting you with that soon. We're really excited about that. Make sure that if you're listening to please rate and review the podcast, because that really helps us out. Thanks for that. And since we've launched, I have a little surprise for you, Andy.
Yeah, okay.
It's a big moment. And, Andy and I have been through some big stuff, some tough fights together. And, we dreamed this up over I guess over 9 months ago, right? And I think this is just a really exciting celebration that we've officially launched. So I brought a little champagne onto the pod.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's little canned bubbly.
It's got a moose?
It's got a moose. There was also one with a pig on it, but I went for the moose because I thought that was more Vermonty.
It's Italian, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not technically...
They don't have moose in Italy, do they?
I don't know the answer to that question.
All right.
Yeah.
This is not a science podcast.
It's not a science podcast. And it's technically not champagne either. It's bubbly, but just go with it.
Okay.
And I just think we should take a moment to kind of celebrate our success here. And not just us, but everyone who's been a part of this and supporting us on this. Cheers.
Well, thank you, Joanna. I thought that would be a scary surprise.
Fair.
So you had a busy week. Every time I turned on the television, you were there. You were like Ronald Reagan in my youth. You were on every channel.
Yeah, it was wild. So part of the reason that I was brought on to Phoenix Books is that we're trying to resist Amazon's encroachment. So Amazon is trying to build a facility in Essex, and that is going to be really hard for the Essex community, and also especially for the Vermont-owned businesses in the community, the smaller ones like Phoenix and a jillion other tiny businesses there. And so we are trying to push back and resist that. So the DRB planned to have a hearing and a vote, and so before that event, I gave a pile of interviews. That's not something I do all the time, but it was really...
You had a rally too, right?
Yes, we had a rally. And that's why I was all over the place for 5 minutes. And a ton of people came out, and it was really amazing. And the room, they actually had to move the location of the hearing and the vote, a few days prior. So they moved it to Essex High School, and the cafeteria was packed. And so they had a ton of people on Zoom too. And actually, a few minutes into public comment, someone is on public comment and they have this phone up to their ear and they're saying, I'm talking to that person on Zoom right there, and they can't hear, and nobody on Zoom can hear. And so they, discussed it and realized it was a violation of open meeting law, and the tech was just overwhelmed by the volume. Mm. And so they had to shut down the meeting, and they have to reschedule it. So they're going to reschedule it, and we don't know when yet. But that was the first step in the process of trying to help the DRB see that it's actually really not in alignment with the town plan. But anyway, so that's what that was all about. And we really appreciated all the community support that we've been getting on that. It's a pretty interesting project.
It looked like a great turnout from what I saw, the clips on the news for the non-hearing, and you were great on
Thank you.
TV. I
Thanks.
really liked your quote about taking Vermont dollars and throwing them up into space. It's very clever.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yep, that was right after we launched Katy Perry into space.
Yeah, that was like the weirdest, cringiest thing. I was like, why are they all in space together? And then I guess I wonder, okay, if I had a spaceship, what would I do with it? I don't know. I'd have a party in space, but it doesn't seem like a good use of Vermont consumer dollars.
I don't know. The world is very strange. It's not the world I expected to live in when I got to this age.
For real. Well, yeah, there was a lot of brouhaha. It was pretty exciting. And then that weekend, I was like, I need to get a Dodge for a few minutes. And we went up to Montreal, which is just one of the places I love most in the world. And it was really fun. And we were in the Jean Talon market, and we're looking for a nosh for Isa, my kiddo. And I look out across the hall, and like all the way across the hall is the very tall figure of Mike Pichak, our state treasurer. And I was like, oh man. But he was so far away that I just was like, oh, I'm not going to drag the family over to say hi. And then, like about 10 minutes later, Steve and I are in line at the Oyster Bar, and it turns out like Emma Mlavini Stanek is at one of the tables enjoying oysters, and I didn't want to bother her, but it was so funny. I was like, wow, I'm surrounded by Vermont politicians no matter what I do.
That's your break.
Yeah, it was so funny. But I hope they all enjoyed the market, and we had a really good time. And then we ran into each other at the Statehouse.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes, in the same committee room. We didn't drive there together. I just want to clarify
would be
that. We arrived and departed separately.
Yeah, it was funny because we've been in the Statehouse at the same time a few times now, but I think this was the first time we were in the same committee room to hear the same bit of testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just had to make sure I didn't like burst into giggles. I was like, all right, I've got to, like, I knew you could be an adult. I wasn't sure if I could.
Yeah, that was never in question.
Yeah, no, but it was, I pulled it off, and I was really proud of myself. But yeah, it was a tense, that committee's been tense.
It has. There were cookies. So
there were cookies.
Help take the edge off a little bit.
That was a good move. It definitely thought, okay, and the next time I want to, butter up some senators, I'll bring some cookies with me.
Or bubbly.
Or bubbly. Yep. Yeah, I'll try that next time for sure.
we have. You are monitoring the housing bill because of the appeal language.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm watching it from the RDC perspective because we are concerned about the TIF district and the housing propositions to try to build more housing.
Yeah, it's been like my sliver of the housing bill that I've been monitoring is super narrow. Phoenix just didn't want to lose their right to appeal because the way we see it is that this bill is for housing, and why would, the change in appeals apply to an industrial development for Amazon? Amazon isn't building housing. But but it's been interesting to monitor the bill, and the whole reason I was there I was there to hear the testimony, but one of the other reasons that I was in the Statehouse that day was that Chittenden County Dems made these stickers, and I was giving them out to our legislators, and the committee just seemed kind of tense, and like I had been thinking during the break I would give some of the stickers, but it just didn't seem like a giving out stickers kind of moment. So I still have their stickers, and I'll give them out another time, and that's okay. And and then I hooked up with the new executive director of the Vermont Democratic Party, May Hanlon, and we had lunch in the CAF, and she's great. I'm super excited about her. Very, very professional, and just seemed to really be on it and not interested in drama, and really very focused on helping Dems win, which is something I really care about.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was right around the corner. You were having a great lunch. I was having a bad
You were, yeah.
Yeah, conference. We've had a grant program for small business technical assistance support, which has been, we ran it once. It was fantastic. We've tried to get it refunded, and it had legs, and it was doing great. And it got to conference committee and appropriations, and it just started to fall apart so fast, which it is how this stuff goes. Like, it can just die really fast, and it was dying to death, and we were trying to revive it, but it ultimately got cut.
It's so tragic.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's how it goes. It's hard to get. There's such a gap between what the legislature has proposed and what the governor said he will willingly accept, and so difficult choices are having to be made. And it's really, I hadn't watched a conference committee before, and it's really interesting. It's just a straight up negotiation, and the House has their priorities, the Senate has their priorities. They're all good, but they all have them arranged in their head in different order, and they're trying to save what's at the top of their list, and they don't, that means cutting things that aren't important to them. And the Senate was supportive of our process, but the House was not. Which, it's supposed to be an independent review, so it's not the worst thing in the world that the Senate and the House come at it from two different perspectives sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I sometimes think that we'd be better off with a unicameral. There's at least one state that has that, actually.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, Nebraska has it. When I was in a merge, I met a legislator from there, and she was telling us about it. So I don't know if they originally had a unicameral or they merged at some point, but I sometimes wonder if that would be more effective.
Future podcast topic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it.
We'll talk about that and Gilmore Girls, because we heard from our comments that we want more Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, we heard from everyone loud and clear that you love the Gilmore Girls. So do I. I see you. And you loved the town meeting day segment, which I also really loved. So yay. Thanks for that feedback. So here we are at our Hot Toppings segment for the week, and we have a really, really good, juicy one. We're going to talk about education finance, which is the topic of the cycle and the session. This is such an important issue right now. It's, everyone... It really affects every Vermonter, like every taxpayer, everyone who has a kid, everyone who's been through the school system. It's just really massive and kind of the ultimate bread and butter issue, almost like a generational issue in that way. And I'm super excited that we get to talk with you, Andy, about it because you're a former school board chair during consolidation and you really know this stuff inside and out and in a way that most people really don't. Yeah, so right now the state is trying to undergo a massive transformation in our school financing. Can you walk us through how that happened a little bit?
Sure. So I think it's important to understand, how we got to this point. And it really, prior to 1997, things operated very differently. It used to be that you had your municipality and you would collect taxes locally and you would fund your schools locally. And we saw that change dramatically in 1997 with Act 60 and the Brigham decision and all of these things that happened. And the problem with the old system, and people, look back fondly on it, and some do and some don't. But the problem with the old system is there was just so much disparity around the state.
Right.
Students were getting different experiences and taxpayers were getting different experiences. And I think, one thing, if you imagine, two towns, so if you live in one town and you're a school board member in one town, and I live in the next town over, and our towns are basically the same. We've got a lot of $100,000 homes. This is 1997 prices, right? Remember? We have about 500 kids in our school. Like, we have roughly the same size school. We have roughly the same size town. And when you drive between us, it's hard to tell the difference between our two towns, except that my town has a ski area off to the side, right? And all of that real estate on the ski area, on the mountain, and all of those, $1 million homes around the mountain. So when you are over there fixing your school budget in your town and you need to collect money for those 500 kids, you just have your $100,000 homes.
Right. Just the residential taxpayers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we have all of those vacation homes, all of that ski area. So it might turn out that our tax rate is 25 cents on the $100 assessment and yours is 75 cents just to fund your 500 kids and to fund our 500 kids. Same school district needs, more or less, but totally different tax base.
Big disparity. Yep.
Yeah. And so you are probably having very rough town meetings over in your town as a school board member trying to get these budgets through, trying to raise money off of these small homes. And we're probably having a great time over in my town. We're probably putting in a pool. Like, it's just, when we put out our tax rate, those $1 million homes, it just adds up to so much money that there's very little left over for us to actually pay down in the valley in our $100,000 homes.
Yeah,
And
that's giving like Pawnee and Eagleton vibes from Parks and Rec.
Yes, I thought about drawing that out when we talked.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make it too goofy, but for sure. And so your towns and towns like you are going to get fed up with that, and you're going to put together a lawsuit, a class action suit in 1997, take it to court and say this isn't fair and equitable, and the Vermont Supreme Court is going to agree with you. And that's the Brigham decision. The Brigham decision says the kids born in your town should have the same opportunity to education dollars as the kids born in my town. They turn to the Vermont legislature and they say, make this work.
Right.
And the Vermont legislature, in what must have been just a crazy session in 1997, has to figure all of this out. And they do it with Act 60.
That's staggering, though. So if you think about it, so the legislators themselves worked it out in committee in one session.
Yeah.
That's hard to imagine right now.
It really is. We've seen this, the amount of transformation they've tried to do this year, and how far they've gotten, and what this order was and how tall it was, and they managed to deliver. And the way they go about it is they create a central fund called the Vermont Education Fund. And every school is going to be funded out of that one central fund. So you're going to have your town meetings just like you always did. Or we're going to have our town meeting just like we always did. And instead of worrying about collecting that money locally, you're just going to worry about what you need to operate your budget. You're going to figure out what your revenues are, and you're going to figure out what's left. You're going to turn to the Vermont Education Fund and say, this is what we need. They're going to write you a check.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You notice, though, critically, we're still having town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the decision they made in 1997, was to keep the way we decided as Vermonters about our education spending as much intact as possible. The difference, though, you're drawing money from the Vermont Education Fund. You are now paying taxes, though, not to fund your local schools. You're paying taxes to refresh the money that's taken from the Vermont Education Fund.
So it's a little like we're all paying into Social Security, but then we'll get the money out later. Like it all goes into a centralized fund.
It's all centralized. It's fed with more than taxes, more than property taxes. It's fed with pieces of sales tax, part of rooms and meals tax, lottery. There are a number of different sources. And every year, starting in 1997 and continuing, the tax commissioner has to figure out how much are we going to get from all these different sources? How much are the budgets going to be across the state, the school budgets? What's the gap? And that gap becomes property taxes. And from that, we know how much real estate we have in the state of Vermont, what it's all worth. Then they can develop a tax rate to tax statewide.
Gotcha.
How are we doing so far?
We're good. We're good. I'm learning things.
All right. You can see a few challenges there.
Yeah.
One is your town now has a much lower tax rate. But how do we stop if you're going to get a check from the Vermont Education Fund to fund your schools, how do we stop each town from asking for things it doesn't need or asking for the moon?
Right.
Right. So this is where we start to really focus in on cost per pupil.
Yeah.
And along with that statewide tax rate, we're going to set an ideal cost per pupil. And if your school district, when you're having your town meeting, if you go over that, you're going to pay a little bit more. And if my district, we go under that, we're going to pay a little bit less than the statewide tax rate. So there'll be a little bit up and down variance across the state, depending on whether you're a low spending or a high spending district.
Gotcha.
Second problem was, so we had a 25-cent tax rate and you had a 75-cent tax rate, and it's now 50 across the state. So your taxes have been cut. You're happy. My taxes have been doubled. And just because I live in a town that had a lot of resources doesn't mean I personally have a lot of resources.
Right.
That doesn't mean I can pay my taxes at a double rate. And a lot of people were under threat of being thrown out of their home, not being able to afford their homes anymore because of tax increase in this 1 year. So to soften that, we come up with income sensitivity. And if you are under a certain threshold, you pay based on your income rather than your property taxes. This is to prevent people who can't afford those large tax increases to still allowed to stay in their homes and pay based on income.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Challenge number 3, if you're going to have a statewide system that is based on property taxes, all of the municipalities are appraising based on their own rules and on their own timetable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need some standardization on how you appraise houses. And you need some way of equalizing the appraisals in one town that hasn't appraised in 30 years with the town that just appraised last year.
Yeah.
And so we end up with the common level of appraisal, this very confusing metric that has a huge impact on the actual taxes we pay every year. And that is simply a measure of how your appraisal value measures to market value. So if you end up with a tax rate, but your appraisals are so old that your house is appraised about half of what it would sell, they're going to double it to bring it up to market value.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The problem is these are all very volatile ingredients.
Yeah.
And over time, the system's going to break down and it's going to hit a head in 2024.
Yeah.
First of all, if you're focusing on cost per pupil, what we're going to see in 1997, you and I as school board members in these two towns, we might have a lot of influence over the cost per pupil. We can cut teachers, we can cut some field trips, we can do a lot of things. Increasingly, as we get towards 2024, things are less in our control. A lot of it is personnel costs and their health insurance costs.
Yeah.
And those are going to go up double digits every year. There's not much we can do to stop that.
Yeah.
A lot of social services are going to be pushed into the schools, and this is a great place. I think we all agree, a great place to apply social services. It makes sense, but we're not going to have a lot of control over that.
Yeah.
The costs are going to be based on the student needs, and there's not much we can do on that. If there's more need, the costs are going to go up. If there's less need, the costs are going to go down, and we can't really influence that as a school board.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something we hear a lot about when budgets start to go up.
As those costs start to rise, more and more people are covered by income sensitivity. That leads to further disconnect of your vote from your tax rate. So that's going to compound the problem. And lastly, what we're going to see is when we hit the pandemic, the costs of homes are going to skyrocket so fast that the system we have to balance out appraisals and home values and all this stuff, it's just not going to be able to keep up. It's going to totally break down. We see a 14% increase in 2024. Taxpayers have had enough.
Okay. Thank you so much for explaining all that history. It's super helpful and just gives me so much helpful context in understanding this complicated, like insanely complicated issue. So in 2024, we had a lot of taxes go up and a lot of Democrats ended up losing their seats over that. And the governor was very angry about that. And the Republicans were really pushing back on that, as were voters in general. So I would say the governor and the legislature, all caucuses were, very focused on trying to make some kind of change. But there was some delay in that. What happened was the governor, kind of late to the party, eventually came downstairs and brought in a new proposal. And the legislature has been working with that and trying to figure out what they're going to do with it. And that's been like the name of the game all session. So can you tell us a little about what the governor proposed and what the Democrats have proposed in the chambers and how that's going to work and what isn't?
Yeah. So we were actually in the gallery when the plan was unveiled. And it was a really interesting, bold presentation from Zoe Saunders, the then interim Secretary of Education, now Secretary of Education. What the governor and his team proposed and what the legislature has largely been in agreement on, and the one thing everybody agrees on, is revisiting that decision that the legislature made in 1997 to keep the local elements and the local control portion of how finance decisions are made. So what he proposed is a foundation formula. And a foundation formula at the very top says, here is a cost per pupil that you are going to get. Multiply the number of students in your district by that, and you get that amount of money. And your school board's function, instead of setting the budget anymore, is to figure out, well, they still set a budget, but they need to set it off of that amount of money.
Right.
They don't get to set the budget and then ask for the money. They get told the amount of money that they're going to get, and then they have to figure out how to manage those resources.
Right.
That's how a foundation formula works. A lot of states use that. We just have not used that in the state of Vermont. We've used local decisions to make that choice from the bottom rather than the top. He rolled out a foundation formula at a cost of $13,200 per student. Should also note that not all students are created equal. If students have special needs, if they are English as second language learners, if they are rural students, they may be valued differently than students in more urban centers. So there's this weighting thing that goes on here that I'm not gonna go into because it gets messy, but it's just important to note that part. Along with that, the governor proposed dropping from the 100+ school districts that we have down to 5.
Yeah. I remember that really distinctly because when we were in the gallery during the secretary's presentation, I remember this giant map of the 5 districts going up on the wall. And in my mind, it's almost like it was like unfurled. And everyone was kind of like gasping. It was a big deal.
It was, and it was hard to tell exactly where the lines were. And we learned that there was one school district that had 30,000 students. They were huge. And yeah, that line ran somewhere South Burlington, Shelburne, Burlington.
Like right near my house.
Somewhere. Yeah, right. Yeah. We were trying to figure out exactly where it lay. It was a bold move to put a map on the screen.
Indeed.
And the legislature has moved away from that. They have tried to get away from maps and outsourced the idea of creating districts. Just because it's so gosh darn controversial, right? Yeah. A cost-saving measure that the governor put into play was class size restrictions. That basically says if your school can't meet certain class size restrictions, it's probably going to disappear. Is probably the implications there.
Yeah.
Those class sizes were 25 for the older students, 15 for younger student grades. And also the governor proposed limiting the amount of money that would go to independent schools, which is something that we have developed across a lot of regions in the state of Vermont, rely a lot on independent schools. They've closed their schools. They pay tuition dollars to those independent schools, and that's their model.
Yeah. And in my observation, the 5 districts, the class size restrictions, and the funding for independent schools have all been hugely controversial so far.
Yes. So as this progressed, this first went to the House, and the first thing they did was take that foundation formula. They liked the idea of the formula. They kept that part, but the $13,200 per student became $15,033 per student. So they raised that significantly. They put together a committee of education experts to come up with the districts, to draw the map. The poor suckers who have to draw that map. They would do that over the summer. They moved the implementation of this to 2029, back from 2027 from the governor's proposal. So they gave it 2 extra years for us to ease into it. They reduced the class size restrictions, 18 for older students. They developed a 15 for middle school students and 12 for younger students. They loosened those restrictions on independent schools, basically freezing the creation of new districts that rely on independent schools, but keeping the ones that were there intact as long as they can meet certain standards.
That piece is so interesting to me because something that a lot of people, like, for example, if you live in Burlington, may not understand is intuitively people think, why are we putting public monies toward private schools? But there are whole parts of Vermont that don't have public schools. They only have independent schools, and that's why we do that.
Yeah, I mean, Linden Institute and the St. Johnsbury Academy are the high schools in that region that we all know, and many of us don't know those aren't public schools.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just counterintuitive if you grew up in Burlington, for example.
Yep.
Yep.
So then this went to the Senate, and that foundation formula got changed from $15,033 per student to $14,870. And how they came up with that number is that would be flat to this year. The House proposal actually would have raised education costs by a little bit. They did not want to come out of this with raised education costs at all. So they lowered that down, and they moved the implementation timeline to 2027. They want to see this happen faster. They're going to have a legislative committee, not an outsourced committee, but the legislators, 4 House members, 4 Senate members, set the districts, draw the maps.
I'm going to want to watch that on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. They removed all class size restrictions.
Wow.
And they loosened restrictions on independent schools even further. This is where we are. It's come out of finance. It is going to appropriations. It's going to be on the Senate floor fairly quickly. Nobody's happy with it, which maybe it tends to be how legislation works, right? It gets compromised to a point where nobody is happy with it. But
right.
Finance Committee gave it it was a 5-2 vote, and even those who voted for it, some of it gave it a very lukewarm endorsement. Senator Cummings said she has never felt worse about passing something out of a bill than this, out of committee than this particular bill. Senator Chittenden was voted for it, but says he has, reservations about it and may not vote for it out on the Senate floor.
Yeah. Wow.
So we'll see how this plays out. It is, going to have some real implications out there. A lot of the low spending, this is one of the criticisms already before it goes to the Senate floor, is that if we have a true statewide education rate and we're not balancing anymore based on your local decisions, a lot of these communities that have consciously made the decision to spend low are now going to have to spend at the middle. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of those districts are your low income areas. So the low income areas are going to see a significant tax increase. So this is going to be an interesting debate on the Senate floor. Definite YouTube and popcorn type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is such a fascinating classic Vermont, policy conflict where we're looking at, centralized resources versus local control, in so many different facets. And it's so interesting. And I really appreciate you kind of helping us understand this better. And we're going to keep covering it and let folks know where it goes. Okay, so here we are at Last Licks, and this is the section of the podcast where Andy and I torture each other a little bit on various...
This is our therapy.
That's right. Andy and I decided we either had to, go to therapy post-campaign or we had to do a podcast, and we chose a podcast, and I think that's for the best.
It's cheaper, more fun.
I think so. So far.
Yeah.
So, all right, so I have some questions about county fairs. My only real experience with a county fair is as the chair of Chittenden County Democrats. Someone brought to my attention that the Chittenden County Democrats usually get a booth at the Chittenden County Fair. Yeah. And so, long story short, you're the sitting senator for Colchester, which is in Chittenden County, and we had all of our candidates signing up to go to the Chittenden County Fair. And I wanted to make sure that none of my candidates were going to be there alone. And you had signed up and nobody else had signed up for that slot. So I signed up, and that was basically the first significant amount of time we spent together.
You had pity on me? Is that?
It wasn't you personally. Yeah. I was just
I thought it was the other way around. I thought you were signed up for that slot. And I remember thinking,
really?
I felt like we'd had some misfires. It just was not going well. And...
Oh, that's right. I mean, I never felt that way, but you had told me that before.
Yes.
Yeah, I never felt that way.
I don't know. I was just I don't think she likes me.
I'm just icy.
So, yeah.
I'm a New Yorker. I don't mess around. Go ahead.
Okay. And I thought I saw you on the sheet, and I thought this way I can spend some time with her. She'll get to know me. She'll see how charming I am, and she'll want to help me.
That's so interesting that we're remembering this differently. Now I want to open the spreadsheet and open the version history and find out, but I'm not going to do that.
We can do that live on the air, right? Wouldn't that be fascinating?
No.
It's better than the time we drank bubbly.
Okay, so that's the only time. So, and I'll say this also about the county fairs. County fairs were never really a thing that it occurred to me to attend. And my kiddo is 14, they're about to turn 15, and I would say over the course of their life, once in a while a parent was like, oh, are you guys gonna go to the county fair? And I was kind of no, it just never would dawn on me to go to a county fair. And I would like to understand as a ruralite what that is about. What is your county fair, what's the affiliation? Why is it important to communities?
For at least personally speaking, the timing of the Champlain Valley Fair before they moved the school year was the last week before school started. Ah. Yeah, and it really for me was just the celebration of the end of summer and getting ready for that step. Oh. And my dad, he owned a machine shop and he was working constantly, and he would take a weekday off. We'd go on a weekday because there was a coupon type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. And so I remember that, just getting to spend time with my family at the Champlain Valley Fair. We'd go on the bracelet days so we could ride rides, unlimited.
So you get like a bracelet and it's like a pass to just go on all the rides all day long?
You're like a 5-year-old VIP. You just wave that bracelet and say, let me in.
Fun.
Yeah. And you can ride as long as you want.
Not for me, but for normal people.
We get there first thing in the morning, and our favorite game was the goldfish game, where you would throw a ping pong ball, and if it landed in a goldfish bowl, you got to take the goldfish home, and you hoped it survived the ride. And we always had to do that last because we didn't want to walk around with the goldfish.
Yeah, I can see why.
Most of them had minutes to live anyway, so it wouldn't have been worth it to pick them up in the morning because they'd be crying by lunch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Aw. And there's like livestock and flowers and things like that? Is that also?
Yeah, and I haven't been around to a lot of the different county fairs, but definitely I know now that the Champlain Valley Fair is less livestock based and agricultural based than a lot of them, but it when I was a kid, it still had more of that agricultural flavor to it.
So you guys don't have your own fair up here. We're in the islands.
Oh, yeah.
Recording. You guys would come into the Chittenden County Fair.
Champlain Valley Fair was our fair.
Oh, yep. Gotcha. Okay. All right. I've learned some things.
But Coney Island doesn't compare to...
I didn't do a lot at Coney Island, but I mean, I've been there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was never like a big amusement park person to begin with. But I guess I was sort of curious, like, in some of the county fairs, don't people like show animals and it's like a thing, right?
And
but maybe this is a little outside both of our experience.
Well, no, and I used to grow pumpkins every year, and I would enter a pumpkin, and then I would run into the building to see if it won a ribbon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you ever win a ribbon?
Yes. Yeah.
Andy, that's exciting.
It is, except I don't know if it's changed, but I go there now, and it seems like everything's got a ribbon on it.
Oh.
So they might be a little liberal with their categories.
I mean, how many kids like grow a pumpkin and enter it in the fair? Maybe you're special. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and the dairy farms and the apple orchards in the islands, we go and see if they had won ribbons too, and that was a more competitive category.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Whether Hackett's or Allen Home had won the blue ribbon that year.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or some other orchard from off the islands.
Gotcha. So there is some piece of like kind of showcasing the local, things people grow.
Yeah, well, I think it is economical for the dairy farmers if you get, cows that are award winning.
Yeah.
They're worth more.
There you go.
For sale and breeding.
That's kind of what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
I learned stuff.
All right. Well, that was so kind-hearted. Mine is called Which Would You Keep? So I'm going to give you a series of choices between two things. One is from New York and one is from Vermont.
Okay.
And you get to pick which one you keep.
Okay.
I figure this is a way to offend
everybody.
A lot of our listeners. Yes.
That's awesome.
All right.
I'm ready.
Your first one.
Oh boy.
New York bagels versus Cabot Seriously Sharp cheddar cheese.
Oh my God.
That's a tough choice, isn't it?
That's Andy.
I forgot to mention, when I went to Montana, I was griping about this on the last episode of the things I missed. The cheddar cheese, like that was the top of the list. It's abysmal outside of Vermont.
That's rough.
And it's yellow. Why is it yellow? Where's the yellow coming from?
I just am betraying my people if I give up on the bagels. Although I will say that the Montreal bagels are really good.
So what's the difference between Montreal and New York bagels?
Okay. In terms of like the optics and the actual user experience, Montreal bagels are smaller and they're not shiny and they're like more like a baked bread product. But my understanding is the actual difference is that New York bagels are boiled and Montreal bagels are wood-fired.
Oh, okay.
And
that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a pretty and like the New York bagels are like they're like shinier and like bigger and I think they have like a little more of like a sour flavor. But I do really like Montreal bagels, and I will say like the Montreal bagel versus the New York bagel, like which is better, is like a big thing in the Burlington Jewish community.
It's not the question I asked.
I know.
Though.
So I guess if
dancing around it.
Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, so if I could have Montreal bagels, I guess I would give up.
No Montreal bagels.
No. Oh, wait. I'm saying if I could keep the cheese and have Montreal bagels, I could give up New York bagels, right? Or is that cheating?
Are you you're negotiating here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this your people kicking in here?
They're going to at me hardcore.
You're picking New York bagels.
And now I changed my mind. I'm keeping the New York bagels, and I'm gonna swap Cabot cheese for Grafton cheddar.
All right, maybe I'll skip a few because it seems to be painful for you.
No, come on, I want to hear it.
The Adirondack Park versus the Long Trail.
I can only keep one, you're saying?
Yeah.
I'm going with the Adirondack Park.
I think that's the right choice.
Thank you.
I agree with you on that one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
we're
love the
both
Long
gonna
Trail.
get ads.
My wife is on the executive team for the Green Mountain Club, Burlington section. So
you're going to pay for that?
possibly. Maybe we should give you a phone a friend on this one. Robert Frost versus Allen Ginsberg.
Ooh. I'm going to give up Robert Frost and keep Ginsberg.
Okay.
I'm in so much trouble. I'm going to be like, yeah, proceed.
Yeah, this is our last podcast. The Brooklyn Bridge versus every covered bridge in the state of Vermont.
Oh my God, these are so good. I worked directly under the Brooklyn Bridge for like 3 years when I used to work for the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. And when we lost World Trade Center 7, they put up they moved us into this building that was directly under the Brooklyn Bridge. And everybody was saying why did you move the bunker under a bridge? It was kind of they felt like it was risky, but I'm just buying time here. So, I'm going to get kicked out of Vermont for this, but yeah, I have to stick with the bridge. It's that runs deep with me.
Yeah, I sort of agree. Do you ever read David McCullough's book on the Brooklyn Bridge?
No.
It's so good.
It is?
Yeah,
Noted.
Really good. All right, I think this one will be easier. Teddy Roosevelt versus Howard Dean.
Oh, Howard Dean, come on.
You got to go with the Democrat.
It's not just
the one who's alive and the one who knows where you live.
That's true, but Howard is sunshine and rainbows. Just love that guy.
Yeah, so I'd give you an easy one right there in the middle.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Calvin Klein versus Darn Tough.
Darn Tough.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a big CK wearer. I'm over it. Okay. Yeah.
Lake Champlain versus the Finger Lakes.
Ooh. Lake Champlain.
Okay.
Yeah. But did you know that Seneca Lake it's either the deepest or the second deepest lake in the world?
No.
Yeah, my summer camp was on Seneca Lake.
Huh.
Yeah, glacial.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yep, fun fact.
The Science Podcast continues.
I'm so not qualified for that. Proceed.
Yep. This is where we're going to lose some people.
Oh, now it is?
I think we'll be on the same page on this one.
Good.
All right.
Good.
Fish versus the Beastie Boys.
Oh my God, the Beastie Boys.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, guys.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Fish. So many people, are going to really hate on us really hard.
From the world.
Yeah, I love the Beastie Boys, yeah.
Ben and Jerry's versus the Lemon Ice King of Corona.
You were actively trying to hurt me.
I am.
This is the most violent I've ever seen Andy.
We should have chose therapy. We might need to do therapy after this.
Yeah, Lemon Ice King. I'm sorry.
Really? Over Ben and Jerry's? I have got to try this stuff.
It's just so special. It's special.
All right. I'm going down to Queens in September. You'll have to give me some directions here.
Yeah. I will say I really love Ben and Jerry's. I especially like Americone Dream. And when I was pregnant, I could not stop eating it. And I actually had a nightmare once that they stopped making it. And then the next time I went to the store, I hoarded it. I bought out City Market of Americone Dream. I was like, I'm not going through that again.
Yeah, I've been through pregnancy too.
Ish.
Not personally.
No.
Someone close to me.
Right.
All right, last one. The Empire State Building versus the Pit.
Versus the Pit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Empire State Building.
Good choice.
Yeah, even with the weird elevator now.
All right.
Yeah.
Should we give people an email address for you to...
You can just... Our DMs are open still. You can vent your rage. I just want you all to know that I chose to live here and I live Vermont. And thanks so much for that, Andy.
Yeah.
That was fun times. I'm still a big fan of the last lick
You brought me
segment.
presents, and I gave you this.
Yeah, no, it's good. That was a present in a way. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you all for listening.
Follow us between episodes for the latest updates on our socials at There's No A in Creamy on Instagram, Substack, and Blue Sky.
And catch us on our next episode of There's No A in Creamy, Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond in Apple Podcasts and Spotify.